Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Before we begin today's story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Leave a comment below and tell me your city and state, or your country if you're joining us from somewhere else. I always enjoy seeing people from all over the world come together through these stories. Now, let's begin. Sometimes, the smallest decision can change a life forever. And sometimes, it begins with just $1. Mom, do you think a house can remember who belongs there? Caleb asked, his small voice nearly lost beneath the hum of the convenience store refrigerator. Naomi Carter looked down at her 7-year-old son and wished, for one dangerous second, that she had an answer worth giving him. Outside, February rain tapped against the glass in thin, restless lines. Inside, the fluorescent lights made everything look tired, including the cashier, the faded floor tiles, and the $20 inhaler refill resting beside a cup of instant noodles on the counter. Naomi opened her wallet and counted again, though she already knew the truth. 2 crumpled bills. 3 quarters. A dime. For pennies. Not enough. Her fingers paused over the noodles. We still have food at home, she said, keeping her voice light. Caleb did not argue. He had learned not to. He simply adjusted the strap of his worn backpack and rubbed one thumb across the cartoon astronaut stitched near the zipper, a habit he had whenever he was hungry or scared. Naomi slid the noodles away and paid for the inhaler. The cashier gave her an apologetic look, but Naomi smiled first, as if kindness could make the moment smaller. It did not. After the purchase, she had $1 left. Bus fare for the morning. Without it, she would have to walk nearly 3 miles to the community clinic where she processed billing records. Being late again could cost her the job. Losing the job would mean missing rent. Missing rent would mean another notice under the door, another conversation with Caleb about why grown-ups sometimes packed boxes without knowing where they were going. Naomi tucked the dollar into her coat pocket and reached for her son's hand. That was when Caleb stopped beside the lottery display. A bright ticket showed a little white house with blue shutters and a porch wrapped in sunlight. Across the top, gold letters read "Home Again." That house has 2 windows in front, Caleb said softly. Like the one I remember. Naomi's chest tightened. He had been 4 when they left their last real home. Since then, there had been a basement apartment, a motel room, and the narrow unit they rented now, where the heater coughed at night and the lock blinked red whenever the payment system decided their rent was late. Caleb had never asked for a yard. He had never asked for a room of his own. He only watched other children draw houses at school and always colored the windows blue. It's just a scratch ticket, baby, Naomi said. I know. He looked away before she could see the hope he was trying to hide. That hurt more than if he had begged. Naomi felt the dollar in her pocket. 1 ride to work. 1 bad decision. 1 tiny, foolish chance to give her son a dream that lasted longer than the walk home. She had spent years making the responsible choice, and somehow responsibility had still brought her to a counter where she could afford medicine or dinner, but not both. 1 home again, she told the cashier. The ticket slid across the counter with a dry whisper. Naomi handed over her last dollar. Caleb's face brightened, then quickly softened, as though he understood joy should be handled carefully. She used her apartment key to scrape away the silver coating. The first symbol appeared, then the second, then a third little house. Naomi stopped breathing. The cashier leaned closer. Caleb squeezed her sleeve. Beneath the final strip of silver, dark blue words emerged. Grand prize, 114, Hawthorne Street. For a moment, the store went silent around her. Naomi stared at the address. Caleb stared at the picture. Behind them, a man in a dark wool coat stepped closer. He was tall, black, perhaps in his late 30s, with rain on his shoulders and an old brass key clenched between his fingers. His eyes moved from the ticket to Naomi, then back to the address as if the paper had opened a door he had spent years trying to keep closed. His face changed, not with greed, but with something heavier, something that looked almost like grief. Naomi folded the ticket into her palm. The man's voice came low and unsteady. That's mine. Caleb stepped in front of his mother before Naomi could move, his small body brave in a way no child should ever need to be. Naomi placed one hand on his shoulder and lifted her eyes to the stranger. Then you'd better explain, she said, because I just spent everything I had on it. The stranger looked at Caleb before answering, and whatever he had planned to say seemed to disappear. My name is Julian Bennett, he said at last. That address belonged to my mother. Naomi kept one hand on Caleb's shoulder and the other closed around the ticket. The cashier glanced between them, uncertain whether to call someone or simply pretend she had heard nothing. Julian reached into his coat and pulled out a worn brass key, its edges dulled by years of use. I grew up there, he continued. I did not know it had been offered as a prize. Naomi studied him carefully. His coat was expensive, but his voice was not demanding. It carried the strained patience of someone standing too close to an old wound. Still, grief did not give him the right to claim what she had paid for. Then you should talk to whoever put it on the ticket, she said. Not me. Julian looked as though he wanted to argue, but Caleb coughed, a small dry sound that made Naomi reach immediately for the paper bag containing his inhaler. That ended the conversation. She guided her son toward the door, feeling Julian's gaze follow them into the rain. By 6 the next morning, the storm had thinned to a cold mist. Naomi packed Caleb's lunch with 2 slices of toast, an apple cut into careful quarters, and the last spoonful of peanut butter spread so thin it nearly vanished. She wrote the time for his next dose on a sticky note and pressed it inside his lunchbox. Read it back to me, she said. 2 p.m. 1 puff. Tell Ms. Reynolds first. 2 p.m. 1 puff. Tell Ms. Reynolds first, Caleb repeated. Naomi checked the seal on his inhaler, repaired the broken zipper on his backpack with a loop of dental floss, and kissed the top of his head. She did not mention the ticket folded inside an envelope beneath her shirt drawer. Hope felt safer when hidden. After walking Caleb to the school bus stop, Naomi began the nearly 3-mile trip to Harbor Community Clinic. The sidewalks were slick, and the cold found its way through the seams of her shoes. She arrived 11 minutes late, breathless but composed, and slipped behind the billing desk before her supervisor finished morning rounds. The clinic smelled of disinfectant, burnt coffee, and wet coats. By 9, Naomi had already corrected 2 insurance codes, found a duplicate charge on an elderly patient's account, and explained to a frightened father why his daughter's medication had not been denied, only entered under the wrong birth date. Numbers made sense to her. They did not judge. They either matched or they did not. At 10:30, her phone vibrated inside her desk drawer. The message came from Bennett Urban Living, the company that owned her apartment building. Final notice. Payment not received. Electronic access will be suspended in 3 days. Naomi read it twice. She had paid the rent 4 days earlier. The money had left her account. She opened the photograph she had taken of the receipt and called the number beneath the warning. After 12 minutes of recorded music, a woman answered. Naomi gave her confirmation code, payment date, and bank reference number. Keys clicked in the background. I am sorry, Ms. Carter, but the system shows an unpaid balance. The system is wrong, Naomi said. I have the receipt. You may upload supporting documents for review. How long does review take? 7 to 10 business days. Naomi looked at the notice. 3 days. My son lives there. The woman's voice softened, but the answer did not. I understand. Unfortunately, I cannot override the account status. Naomi ended the call before frustration could change her tone. She placed both palms flat on the desk and breathed until the fluorescent lights stopped feeling so bright. One missed shift had already placed her on a final warning at work. One locked door could make her home legally unstable. Caleb's father had recently asked the court to reconsider custody, claiming Naomi could not provide a consistent residence. Each problem had found the next one and taken its hand. At lunch, Naomi unfolded the ticket beneath her desk. On the back, in lettering small enough to punish tired eyes, it said that all prizes required verification by Bennett Charitable Holdings. A telephone number was printed below. She called. The assistant who answered asked for the ticket code, paused, then returned with a voice suddenly more formal. Ms. Carter, Mr. Bennett would like to meet with you tomorrow morning. Which Mr. Bennett? Naomi asked, though she already knew. Julian Bennett, Chief Executive Officer of Bennett Urban Living. Naomi looked again at the eviction notice glowing on her phone. The man who had said the house was his also owned the building that might lock her son outside. For the first time since buying the ticket, Naomi wondered whether she had won anything at all. By 8 the next morning, Naomi had already decided she would not let Julian Bennett see her afraid. She pressed Caleb's cleanest shirt with the bottom of a warm saucepan because the iron had stopped working months ago, packed his inhaler beside his lunch, and checked the apartment lock twice before they left. The red warning light above the keypad blinked once, then turned green. 2 days remained. Are we moving again? Caleb asked as they waited for his school bus beneath a gray Baltimore sky. Naomi tightened the scarf around his neck. I am working on keeping us right where we are. It was not a promise. She had learned the difference. At Harbor Community Clinic, the waiting room was already full. Naomi's meeting with Julian was scheduled for 10:30, and her supervisor had approved only 1 hour away from the billing desk. At 9:50, she began closing her files when Mrs. Ellis approached the counter clutching a folded notice. The elderly woman's wool hat was damp from the mist, and her hands trembled as she pushed the paper toward Naomi. They canceled my treatment, she whispered. They said I owe $800. Naomi opened the account. Mrs. Ellis had never missed a payment. The charge belonged to another patient with the same last name and a birth date 1 digit different. It should have taken 5 minutes to correct. The insurance portal froze twice. The clinic manager told Naomi to leave it for the afternoon. Her appointment is in 20 minutes, Naomi said. Then someone else can handle it. Naomi looked through the glass partition. Mrs. Ellis sat alone, holding her purse against her chest as though it contained everything she had left. On Naomi's desk, the clock changed to 10. Missing the appointment could cost her the house. Leaving now could cost Mrs. Ellis the treatment she had prepared months to receive. Naomi sat back down. She called the insurer, verified the identification number, reopened the claim, and remained on hold while the minutes slipped away. At 10:18, the error was removed. Mrs. Ellis's appointment was restored. You did not have to do that, the woman said, her eyes shining. Naomi handed back the notice. Someone did. Then she grabbed her coat and ran. Bennett Tower rose above downtown in dark glass and silver steel. Naomi reached the lobby 12 minutes late, rain cooling against the back of her neck. The receptionist looked at her worn shoes before calling upstairs. A woman in a fitted charcoal suit arrived less than a minute later. Claire Donovan, Chief Operating Officer, she said, offering no smile. Your verification window ended at 10:30. I called from the cab. You arrived after the scheduled time. Claire led her into a conference room where the city stretched beyond the windows like something owned. A document waited beside a glass of water. The charitable foundation is prepared to offer you $5,000 as a goodwill payment, Claire said. In exchange, you will surrender the ticket and release all claims connected to the property. Naomi did not sit. Was the ticket valid? The circumstances of its distribution are under review. That was not my question. Claire folded her hands. $5,000 could be useful to someone in your position. The words were quiet, almost polite. That made them worse. Naomi thought of the blinking lock, Caleb's inhaler, and the custody petition inside her kitchen drawer. $5,000 could buy time. It could not buy back the part of her that would know she had been pressured into accepting less because someone had studied how desperate she was. She placed the ticket on the table but kept 2 fingers over its edge. You do not need to call it kindness, Naomi said. You only need to call it what was promised. Claire's expression tightened. You should consider what you are risking. I have been considering it every hour. The conference room door opened. Julian stood there without his coat, his tie loosened, the old brass key visible in his hand. His gaze moved from Claire to the unsigned agreement. Leave us, he said. Claire gathered the document, but Naomi stopped her. No, leave that. For the first time, Claire looked surprised. She set it down and walked out. Julian entered slowly. Behind him, on a shelf beside the window, stood a framed photograph of a black woman smiling on a white porch. The same blue shutters. The same 2 front windows. The same house printed on Naomi's ticket. Julian noticed where she was looking and closed his fingers around the brass key. That was my mother, he said. Naomi lifted her eyes to his. Then maybe you should start by telling me why her house was sold as hope to people like me. Julian did not answer immediately. The city moved behind him in pale reflections, cars threading through wet streets 60 floors below, while the brass key rested against his palm like something heavier than metal. My mother bought that house before I was born, he said. She worked nights at a hospital laundry and saved for 11 years. Every repair was done 1 room at a time. Every bill was paid in an envelope she kept beside the stove. Naomi glanced at the photograph. The woman on the porch wore a yellow dress and held one hand above her eyes against the sun. Julian stood beside her as a boy, thin and serious, one sneaker untied. She left it to you, Naomi said. Yes. His thumb moved across the worn teeth of the key. And after she died, I stopped going there. He crossed to the window, but his reflection remained turned toward the photograph. The foundation was supposed to maintain the property and use it for temporary housing. I approved the transfer. I did not approve a lottery. Naomi heard the careful distinction. It sounded like the language people used when they wanted responsibility separated into manageable pieces. Your name is on the building, she said. Your company printed the ticket. Your foundation offered the house. Julian looked at her then. You think that makes every decision mine? No. I think it makes the consequences yours to understand. The words settled between them. Julian placed the key beside the photograph. For the first time, Naomi noticed the faint indentation it had left in his palm. When I was 12, the bank tried to take that house, he said. My mother missed 2 payments after she got sick. I remember a man in a gray suit explaining that policy was policy. She stood on that porch and asked him to give her 30 days. He gave her 10. His voice remained level, but one shoulder had gone rigid. She found the money. She always found the money. Naomi thought of her own rent receipt, the red notice, and Caleb asking whether they were moving again. Then you know what 10 days can do to a family. Julian's eyes lowered. I know what I told myself it did. I built systems so no one person could decide everything. Rules, automatic reviews, risk scoring. I believed fairness meant removing emotion. Emotion was not the problem, Naomi said. The man refusing to look at your mother was. Julian flinched so slightly that another person might have missed it. Naomi did not. Claire's offer remained on the table, $5,000 in clean black print. Julian picked it up and read the first page. Did she tell you why the ticket might be invalid? She told me I was late. That is not enough. It was enough for her. He set the agreement down. The tickets used for the public campaign were supposed to carry a blue verification seal. Yours does not. Naomi unfolded the ticket and turned it over. There was no blue seal, only a printed code and the foundation's telephone number. So someone sold something they were not supposed to sell, and I lose because I bought it? I did not say that. You have not said what happens if it is valid. Julian looked toward the photograph again. If it is valid, the house becomes yours. The answer came quietly, without negotiation. Naomi watched him measure the cost of saying it. And if it is not, then I will determine how it entered circulation and what obligation the foundation still has to you. Obligation is not the same as promise. No, he said. It is not. His honesty surprised her more than reassurance would have. Julian opened the conference room door and asked his assistant to bring the distribution records, then requested an immediate hold on any transfer connected to 114 Hawthorne Street. He did not call security. He did not ask Naomi to surrender the ticket. Instead, he made a copy while she watched and returned the original to her hand. Until this is resolved, keep it somewhere safe. Naomi slipped it into her wallet. I already know how to protect the little I have. Julian's gaze rested on her for a moment, then shifted to the address printed on the identification form beside her name. His expression changed. You live at Mercer Gardens? For now. That property belongs to Bennett Urban Living. I know. Your system says my rent disappeared. Julian reached for the notice she placed before him. He read the 3-day warning once, then again. The room seemed to grow colder. This should have been reviewed by a person. It was reviewed by a recording and a woman who said she could not override the screen. Julian pressed the intercom. Get me the Mercer Gardens account logs. Naomi gathered her coat. I have to return to work. Ms. Carter. She paused at the door. Julian held the notice in one hand and his mother's key in the other. I will find out what happened. Naomi met his eyes. Do not find out for me, she said. Find out how many doors your system has already closed. Julian arrived at Mercer Gardens just after sunset, without a driver, an assistant, or the polished distance Naomi had expected from a man whose name appeared on half the buildings in the neighborhood. The courtyard lights flickered in the damp evening air, and the wind pushed discarded receipts against the concrete steps. Naomi was standing beside the entrance with Caleb, trying her key for the 3rd time. The light above the keypad flashed red. It worked this morning, she said, more to herself than to anyone else. Caleb shifted his backpack higher on one shoulder. Maybe it forgot us again. Julian heard him. His face tightened as he approached. I asked for a hold on the account. Naomi turned, surprise hardening into frustration. Then your hold did not reach the door. Julian pulled out his phone. I can have someone reset it now. That fixes tonight. Your son is cold. Yes, he is. Naomi looked directly at him. So look at why. Caleb coughed, then pressed his fist lightly against his chest. Naomi knelt at once, took the inhaler from the front pocket of his backpack, and waited while he used it. Julian stood still. No orders. No phone call. For the first time, he seemed to understand that moving quickly was not the same as seeing clearly. Naomi rose and showed him the rent receipt on her phone. The payment left my account at 11:47 at night. The system posted it as pending, then erased it by morning. Julian asked to see the time again. She showed him 2 more screenshots from neighbors in the building. Same pattern. Payments made after 11:30. Missing by sunrise. How did you get these? He asked. People talk when they realize they are not the only ones being told they made a mistake. Naomi pointed toward the building. Mrs. Green on the 3rd floor paid on time. Mr. Foster downstairs did too. Both got warnings. One family left before the lock changed because they thought fighting would cost more than moving. Julian studied the screenshots, then called the internal systems director. This time Naomi listened. She heard him ask for transfer logs, timestamp batches, and the overnight migration window. His voice remained calm, but the questions sharpened with each answer. At last, he ended the call and looked toward the red light over the door. The payments entered during the nightly data transfer are being pushed into an unresolved queue, meaning the system records the money, but the property account never receives confirmation, and no one checks. Julian did not answer immediately. That was answer enough. Caleb's breathing had steadied, but the heater inside the lobby was not running. Naomi wrapped her coat more tightly around him. Julian made another call, this one to restore access to every flagged unit at Mercer Gardens until a manual review was completed. Then Naomi took the ticket from her wallet. The code on this was printed at 11:43, she said. Julian looked up. How do you know? The number sequence. It matches the timestamp format on the payment confirmations. She had noticed it at lunch, comparing the tiny digits on the back with the receipts she kept photographing. Julian turned the ticket beneath the courtyard light. The missing blue verification seal had not been omitted at random. The ticket had been processed during the same overnight transfer window. His expression changed as the pieces aligned. The test batch was released into the public inventory, he said quietly. So it is valid. Yes. The word carried no relief. Julian stared at the printed address, and Naomi saw the cost of certainty settle across his face. Before either of them could speak, Claire Donovan called. Julian answered on speaker. The foundation records are confirmed, Claire said. The ticket is authentic, but we have a larger problem. Hawthorne Street was added to the collateral schedule for tomorrow's refinancing. Naomi watched Julian's hand close around the brass key in his pocket. Remove it. We cannot. The lender approved the package based on that property and 6 others. If we alter it now, the entire agreement may collapse. The house was awarded legally. Then offer Ms. Carter another property. Naomi stepped closer. I can't hear you. Claire paused only briefly. Ms. Carter, this is not personal. The refinancing protects current housing projects, employee payroll, and several hundred tenant assistance accounts. One house cannot be allowed to jeopardize all of that. The argument was reasonable. That made it dangerous. Julian looked at Naomi, then at Caleb, who was drawing a square house in the condensation on the locked glass door. When was Hawthorne added? Julian asked. Claire answered after a silence. 3 weeks ago. By whose authorization? Another silence. Mine. The lock clicked open behind Naomi, but no one moved. Claire continued, her voice lower now. I believed you would never use the property. The foundation needed an asset with clean title. I made a decision for the company. Julian looked at the red keypad, the ticket in Naomi's hand, and the address of his childhood home. The same system that had erased her payment had nearly erased her claim. The same people who called it efficiency had decided an empty house mattered more as collateral than as a promise. Freeze the refinancing, he said. Claire's response came immediately. You do not have the votes to do that alone. The line went quiet. Naomi finally opened the door and guided Caleb inside. Before following, she looked back at Julian. You told me you would find out what happened, she said. Now you know. Julian stood beneath the flickering courtyard light, his mother's key in one hand and the truth in the other. For the first time in years, neither belonged to a problem he could solve without losing something. The next morning, Julian arrived at Naomi's apartment carrying a folder instead of promises. Caleb sat at the kitchen table tracing blue windows onto a paper house while the radiator clicked without producing much heat. Naomi did not offer Julian coffee. She remained standing near the counter, one hand resting beside the envelope that held the ticket. Claire scheduled an emergency board meeting for noon, Julian said. If the refinancing fails, several projects may lose funding. And if it succeeds? Naomi asked. The house remains tied to the agreement until the debt is repaid. So my legal prize becomes your company's safety net. Julian opened the folder and placed a document on the table. I can replace it with another house. Same market value, better condition. I will also clear your rent account, cover Caleb's medical expenses for 1 year, and provide $25,000 for relocation. Caleb's crayon stopped moving. Naomi looked at the numbers, but did not touch the page. For one breath, she imagined what they could buy. A reliable car. Groceries without counting every item. A bedroom where Caleb would not wake when the neighbor upstairs crossed the floor. She hated how quickly relief could make surrender resemble wisdom. What do I have to sign? She asked. Julian hesitated. That hesitation told her where to look. She turned the page and found the confidentiality clause halfway down. Naomi read it once, then again. By signing, she would release all claims connected to the ticket, the payment system, and any harm caused by account errors. She would also agree not to assist other tenants in future disputes. You want to help us disappear quietly, she said. I want to protect you while I fix the larger problem. No. You want to decide which part of the problem deserves to be seen. Julian's jaw tightened. If I announce a system-wide failure before we know the full scope, the lender may leave. Construction could stop. Employees could lose jobs. That may all be true. Naomi slid the document back toward him. It is also true that families have already lost homes because your company called their receipts mistakes. I am trying to prevent more damage by asking the person with the least power to carry the silence. Caleb looked between them, sensing the change in the room. Naomi lowered her voice. Go wash your hands for breakfast, baby. When he left, she picked up the agreement and tore only her and signed signature page in half. She placed the remaining pages back inside the folder. Keep those, she said. You may need to remember what you almost asked me to trade. Julian did not defend himself. That made his failure feel more real, not less. I thought offering certainty was the responsible choice. Certainty for whom? The question stayed between them after he left. At Harbor Community Clinic, Naomi spent her lunch break comparing the payment records neighbors had sent overnight. 7 families showed the same missing confirmation window. 3 had already moved. 1 woman had slept in her car with 2 children before finding space with a cousin. Naomi created a handwritten timeline because she did not trust the clinic computer with private information. Every entry began with a payment and ended with a warning. By 5, she had enough to see the pattern clearly. Her phone rang as she packed her bag. Claire's voice was calm. Ms. Carter, Mr. Bennett's offer expires at 6. Then it expires. You should understand that rejecting it will not strengthen your legal position. Is that advice or a threat? It is reality. Your ticket was not verified within the required appointment window. Naomi looked at the clock. She had arrived 12 minutes late because she had corrected Mrs. Ellis's medical account. The ticket was verified as authentic. Authenticity and eligibility are separate matters. That distinction did not appear until I refused your agreement. Claire exhaled softly. You are placing your son's stability at risk for people you barely know. Naomi closed her folder. They are not strangers to the system. When she reached Mercer Gardens, the courtyard was dark. Caleb stood beside the entrance with Mrs. Green from the 3rd floor, his backpack hugged to his chest. Naomi hurried toward him. What happened? Mrs. Green pointed to the keypad. The light had turned red again. Every flagged unit locked at 5:30. Naomi tried her key. Nothing. A message appeared on her phone seconds later. Access suspended. Account delinquent. She called Julian, but the call went directly to voicemail. Across town, the board meeting was still in session, and his authority had already been temporarily restricted. Naomi pulled Caleb's hat lower over his ears. He looked up at her, fighting tears with the same careful bravery he had shown in the store. Did we lose our home? He whispered. Naomi held his cold hands between hers. Through the glass, she could see their apartment key hanging uselessly from her own fingers. "No," she said, though the word trembled. "But somebody has decided we have to prove it is ours." The waiting room at Harbor Community Clinic looked different after midnight. Without patients, the rows of plastic chairs seemed farther apart, and the vending machines hummed like tired engines beneath the dim security lights. Naomi had spread 2 coats across 3 chairs to make a narrow bed for Caleb. He slept with one hand curled around his inhaler and the other tucked beneath his cheek. Every few breaths, Naomi leaned closer to make sure his chest rose evenly. Her supervisor, Denise, had allowed them to stay until morning, but only after Naomi promised they would be gone before the first patients arrived. "You should call his father," Denise had said gently. Naomi had looked at Caleb's sleeping face and shaken her head. His father had not asked whether Caleb was warm or breathing well. He had asked the court whether Naomi's address was permanent. At 1 in the morning, Naomi opened the folder she had carried from Mercer Gardens. The clinic printer clicked softly as she copied rent receipts, lockout notices, and bank confirmations from 7 families. She arranged them by date, then by payment time. 11:32, 11:41, 11:58. Each payment entered before midnight. Each account marked delinquent by sunrise. The pattern was not dramatic. That was what made it cruel. No masked villain. No hidden room. Just ordinary families losing doors because a machine moved numbers into the wrong column, and people with authority trusted the screen more than the receipts. At 2:15, Julian entered the clinic alone. His tie was gone, and his white shirt was wrinkled beneath his coat. He stopped when he saw Caleb sleeping beneath the thin blanket. "I called 9 times, Naomi whispered. "The board took my phone during the vote. They locked us out while you were in a room, deciding how much truth the company could afford." Julian accepted the words without defending himself. "My authority has been temporarily suspended. Claire controls property operations until the refinancing is resolved." He looked toward Caleb. "I can take you both to a hotel." Naomi closed the folder. "No, it is below freezing outside. That does not make your solution wrong. It makes it incomplete." Julian's gaze dropped to the papers. "What have you found?" Naomi moved the folder toward him, but kept her hand on top. 7 matching cases from 1 building. 3 families already moved. Mrs. Green missed work twice because the lock failed. Mr. Foster paid a late fee on rent that was never late. Another mother slept in her car with her children. Julian reached for the first receipt, then stopped as if asking permission without words. Naomi lifted her hand. He read every page. By the 4th case, the certainty had left his face. By the 7th, he looked older than he had in the convenience store. "I should have asked for this before offering you money," he said. "You should have asked the people living there." Julian sat across from her. For several seconds, neither spoke. The only sound was Caleb breathing and rain touching the dark windows. "What do you need from me?" Julian asked. Naomi had expected another promise. The question unsettled her more. "Do not speak for me," she said. "Do not make me the grateful mother you rescued. Confirm the system you approved. Confirm the board knew about the errors. Then let me explain what happened. Claire will argue that the records are incomplete. They are incomplete because your company kept the rest." Julian nodded slowly. "There is an emergency housing hearing at 3 this afternoon. The city attorney agreed to review the lockouts, but Claire will challenge your standing and the ticket claim together." Naomi looked toward Caleb. In 12 hours, she could lose the house, the apartment, and the appearance of stability the custody court expected her to maintain. "Then I will be there." Julian's phone vibrated. He read the message and turned the screen toward her. Claire had sent a copy of the agreement he had brought that morning. His signature appeared beneath the settlement terms, although Naomi's line remained blank. "She will say you accepted the offer in principle," Julian said. "I did not." "I know. Knowing is not the same as proving." Naomi removed the torn signature page from her folder. She had kept both halves. The edges matched the document exactly, and the timestamp from the clinic copier showed when she had duplicated it after refusing. Julian stared at the pieces, then at her carefully ordered records. "You kept everything. People like me do not get to arrive with only our word." A small voice came from the chairs. "Mom." Caleb sat up, his hair flattened on one side. Naomi crossed to him and checked his breathing. "I am here. Are we going home today?" She could not offer him certainty. Not this time. She held his hand and told him the truth. Today, I am going to make them listen. At 9 that morning, a city clerk called to confirm the hearing. Naomi's evidence had been accepted for preliminary review. Julian would testify, but he would do so without executive authority, without control of company counsel, and without any guarantee that the board would keep him afterward. Before leaving the clinic, he paused beside Caleb's makeshift bed. My mother once told me a key means nothing if the wrong person decides who may use it, he said. Naomi gathered the receipts into her folder. Then today you get to decide whether you learned anything from her. At 2:45, Naomi entered the municipal hearing room with Caleb beside her and Julian several steps behind. Claire was already seated at the company table. In front of her lay the signed settlement, the ticket verification rules, and a red folder marked confidential. When Naomi took her place, Claire opened the folder and looked directly at Julian. Before this begins, she said, the board has authorized me to make one final offer. Naomi placed the apartment key, the rent receipts, and the ticket in a straight line before her. So have I, she answered. Mine is the truth. The hearing officer, a gray-haired woman named Evelyn Brooks, looked first at Claire's red folder, then at the three objects Naomi had placed before her. Ms. Donovan, state your offer clearly. Claire rose with the calm precision of someone accustomed to rooms turning quiet when she spoke. Bennett Urban Living will transfer a comparable property to Ms. Carter, forgive all disputed rent, cover temporary housing, and provide $30,000 in relocation support. In exchange, she will withdraw the ticket claim and agree that the payment errors were isolated administrative failures. Naomi felt Caleb's fingers tighten around hers beneath the table. $30,000 could change the shape of their days. It could fill a refrigerator, repair a car they did not own, and place distance between Caleb and the possibility of another locked door. Claire knew that. Everyone in the room knew it. And the other tenants? Naomi asked. Claire's expression remained composed. Their accounts will be reviewed individually. Behind closed doors? Through established procedures. Naomi looked at Julian. He did not nod, signal, or rescue her from the silence. He was doing what she had asked. Listening. Naomi stood and placed the ticket beside the rent receipt. I bought this after paying for my son's inhaler, she said. It was not a smart decision. That dollar was supposed to get me to work the next morning. Claire leaned back slightly, as though the admission had helped her case. Naomi continued. I walked almost 3 miles because of that choice. I arrived late to this company's office because I stayed at my job to correct another woman's medical bill. I am not asking anyone here to believe I have never made a mistake. I am asking why my mistakes carry immediate consequences while this company's mistakes are called procedures. The room went still. Naomi placed 7 payment confirmations in a row. These families paid. The money left their accounts between 11:30 and midnight. During the system transfer, those payments were moved into an unresolved queue. By morning, the tenants were marked delinquent. The same transfer error released my ticket without its verification seal. The company called the ticket invalid until it became useful to call it negotiable. Claire stood. Those records have not been independently authenticated. The payment times have, Julian said. It was the first time he had spoken. Claire turned toward him. You no longer have authority to represent the company. I am not representing it. Julian rose slowly. I am testifying about what I approved. He handed the clerk a signed statement. 6 months ago, I authorized the migration to the automated payment platform. I accepted projections showing lower costs and faster enforcement. I did not require a manual review before electronic lockouts. When Ms. Carter showed me the consequences, I offered her money and silence instead of accountability. Claire's voice sharpened. You were trying to prevent a financing collapse. I was trying to make the harm small enough that I would not have to change what caused it. He looked at Naomi, but he did not ask for forgiveness. The first time I saw that ticket, I said it was mine. I was wrong about the house. The failure behind it is mine. Claire opened the red folder and produced the settlement agreement. Mr. Bennett signed these terms. Ms. Carter accepted the discussion and retained the document. Naomi removed the 2 torn halves of the signature page from her folder and placed them together. I retained the evidence that I refused. She added the clinic copier receipt, stamped with the time. Then I spent the night collecting the records your company said did not exist. Hearing Officer Brooks examined the pages, then looked toward Claire. Was Hawthorne Street placed into collateral after the charitable campaign began? Claire paused. Yes. Was the winning ticket sold to the public? Yes. Was the property still advertised as the grand prize? Claire's answer came more quietly. Yes. The officer folded her hands. Then the company may not convert its own internal failure into a penalty against the purchaser. She issued an emergency order recognizing Naomi's claim, suspending all automated lockouts connected to the disputed transfer window, and requiring an independent audit before any affected tenant could be removed. A breath moved through the room like wind through an open door. Caleb looked up at Naomi. Does that mean we can go home? Before she could answer, Claire made one final attempt. Ms. Carter, the company will still honor the private settlement if you withdraw the broader complaint. You could receive the house today. Naomi looked at the ticket, then at the 7 receipts. The house was close enough to touch now. So was the old temptation to protect only what belonged to her. Open their doors first, she said. Then we can talk about mine. Julian closed his eyes for one brief second. The board's attorney handed him a notice confirming his removal from executive control and the suspension of his voting privileges pending review. He read it, signed the acknowledgement, and placed it on the table without protest. Outside the hearing room, phones began ringing across Mercer Gardens as electronic locks changed from red to green. Naomi's own phone lit with a message from Mrs. Green. We are inside. Caleb pressed his face against his mother's arm, and Naomi bent to hold him. The greatest thing she had won that day was not waiting on Hawthorne Street. It was the sound of other families turning their own keys. 3 months later, the morning light reached through the blue shutters of 114 Hawthorne Street and fell across a kitchen table covered with school papers, rent audit forms, and one half-finished cup of coffee. The house did not look like a miracle. The hallway still needed paint. One cabinet door hung, slightly crooked. The furnace made a soft knocking sound whenever it started. Naomi loved all of it. Caleb sat on the floor in his socks, building a cardboard city from empty cereal boxes. He had given every house 2 front windows. This one is the clinic, he said, pointing to the tallest box. And this one is for people who forget their keys. Naomi smiled as she packed his lunch. 2 sandwiches, apple slices, his inhaler in the front pocket with a note that now read more like a reminder than a warning. His breathing had improved since they moved away from the damp walls at Mercer Gardens, but Naomi still checked the seal each morning. Some habits came from love. Others came from fear. She was learning which ones could be softened. The independent audit had found 43 payment errors across 6 properties. Every affected account had been corrected. Fees were returned. Families who had moved because of false notices received relocation support and the option to return. It was not perfect. Some had already built new lives elsewhere. Some apologies arrived too late to repair what uncertainty had done. Naomi understood that justice did not always restore the exact thing that had been lost. Sometimes it only stopped the loss from continuing. She still worked at Harbor Community Clinic 4 days a week. On Fridays, she attended evening classes in financial compliance through a community college program. Bennett Urban Living had offered her a public relations position after the hearing. She declined. Instead, she accepted a paid seat on an independent tenant review council with authority to examine lockout policies before they were approved. I do not want to tell people the system cares, she had said. I want to see whether it does. Julian had not returned to full control of the company. The board removed Claire from property operations, though she remained as an advisor during the transition. Julian sold part of his personal stake to fund reimbursements and accepted outside oversight without asking anyone to praise him for it. Once a month, he sat in a folding chair at the neighborhood library while tenants explained what his reports had failed to show. He spoke less now. He took notes by hand. On that Saturday afternoon, he arrived at Hawthorne Street carrying no folder. The old brass key rested in his palm. Naomi opened the door, but did not immediately invite him inside. He looked past her toward the narrow hallway, where Caleb's coat hung from the banister and a pair of muddy sneakers waited on the mat. The porch railing looks better, he said. Caleb picked the color. Blue. He believes every important thing should be blue. Julian smiled, but his eyes had already moved toward the kitchen where his mother's old curtains had once hung. Naomi had replaced them with simple white ones from a discount store. The room belonged to the present now. Julian held out the key. My mother gave this to me the day I left for college. She said a house should never become more important than the people who need one. Naomi looked at the worn metal but did not take it at once. Why are you giving it to me? Because I kept it like proof that the past still belonged to me. His voice was quiet. It does not. The memory does. The house belongs to the life inside it. Naomi accepted the key and placed it on the table. He remained on the porch. He did not assume forgiveness. He did not ask to enter. Caleb came running from the living room with a small wooden frame in both hands. Inside it was the scratch ticket, flattened carefully beneath the glass. He had drawn 2 blue windows over the printed house, one slightly larger than the other. This one is Mom's, he explained, pointing, and this one is mine. Then he considered Julian for a moment and added a tiny yellow porch light in the corner. That is for visitors who ask first. Naomi laughed, and Julian lowered his eyes as though the sound had reached a place in him that had been closed for years. She stepped aside. You may come in for coffee, she said. Coffee is not forgiveness. I know. And helping fix what you broke does not make you a hero. I know that too. He crossed the threshold slowly. No announcement. No cameras. Just a man entering the house where he had once been a boy, now carrying nothing he could use to claim it. That evening, after Julian left and Caleb had fallen asleep, Naomi hung the framed ticket beside the brass key. The 2 objects looked small against the wall. One had once represented a foolish chance. The other had once represented ownership. Now they meant something quieter. A door had opened because Naomi refused to let anyone decide that desperation made her easier to silence. She turned off the kitchen light and stood for a moment in the glow from the porch. Some things could be purchased. Some could be inherited. But a home became yours only when the people inside it no longer had to be afraid of losing one another. Thank you so much for watching. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who might need it today. I'd love to hear your thoughts, too. Leave a comment below and tell me what this story meant to you, or which moment stayed with you the most. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next one. Until next time, take care of yourself. God bless you.